Hey YouTube, and welcome to my channel. Today is going to be my first video on job scenarios, which I will be doing every week, uploading them probably Saturday night or Sunday morning. So this is the first scenario that I'm going to give you to see if you ran into this too. Got a call from a restaurant. They had a problem with one of their little tiny beer coolers behind the bar. So I go in, I talk to the manager, I look around, everything. The first thing I do all the time is I get the model number of the unit, serial number, the voltage, and the refrigerant. I put that on a ticket or in the notebook. Always need that. And plus, if you ever have to go back, you have all the information already. So anyway, I go in, I look, I open the thing, the cabinet, and all the beers, they're cool, but they're not that great. So first thing I'm thinking to myself is, well, okay, probably low on charge. So what I do is I get down on my knees and I open the little cabinet up. It's a self-contained unit. There's no access valves whatsoever. So I feel around and I'm like, well, okay, the way I'm feeling the lines, the condenser and the suction line, I could tell already that it's undercharged. Plus, I noticed that the condenser is really dirty. That's my cat. It's Fluffy over here, yeah. Anyway, back to the story. So I go down, I'm looking around at the compressor and everything like that. And so the first thing I have to do is I have to access the system. No, there's no valves or nothing on the system to access it. This is all self-contained. It's never been in service before. So what I do is I have to go get a bullet piercing valve. And what a bullet piercing valve is, it's a little tiny valve that clamps onto one of the refrigerant lines, mainly the suction line. And what you do is there's a little Schrader in there that you put the cap on and you tighten the cap. And when you tighten the cap, what happens is there's a little tiny depression that goes in and makes a hole, little tiny hole in the refrigerant line. And as you unscrew the cap to loosen it, what happens is the Schrader stops the refrigerant from coming out. Like think of a tire on a car, right? You put your air pressure in there and you take it out and then there's no air coming out. Well, it's the same thing on a refrigeration line with a Schrader valve. Okay, so anyway, I install that, I put my gauges on, and I'm like, okay, this system is really undercharged. It's like 10 pounds, 55 pounds on the air pressure. And by the way, I'm also gonna upload videos on Wednesday, which I'm gonna have classes, and I'm gonna start with the refrigeration cycle. So people out there are not really familiar with the things I'm talking about, make sure you subscribe, like, and hit that bell, and you can see the other videos too that I have and that I'm going to load up there each week. It'll be a different topic. So anyway, I put the Schrader valve on, I got the valve on, I check it, I had low pressure, like I said. So I'm like, okay, get a leak somewhere. So I'm looking around, okay, I found a leak. Right, it's a little tiny leak over by the filter dryer that they have in the line, okay? So anyway, when you have a system, refrigeration system, and you have a leak and you have to repair it and open the system up, you always have to change the filter dryer to begin with. So I would have had to done this anyway. So what I did is I ripped this filter dryer out, I put a new filter dryer in, soldered it all in, everything looks good. In the meantime, by the way, I forgot to tell you, the little refrigerant that I did have in there, I had to reclaim out, which is very little, it was very little minute. The unit itself was a beverage air unit, and it only handled a couple ounces of refrigerant anyway. So what I did have, I took out of the system. So anyway, put the new filter dryer in, okay? But as I put the filter dryer in, the only thing you have to realize is that when you access the system and put a bullet valve in, that's only temporary. Don't ever leave the bullet valve in because it's held on, as you'll know or see, it's held on by Allen key screws. And it happens, they loosen up and they don't seal right. And what happens over time, it's a guaranteed leak, guaranteed callback, which of course is no good. So what I did is after I replaced the filter dryer, I took the bullet valve out. Okay, cut the pipe, cleaned the pipe, and what I did is I put an access T in there with a Schrader fitting, so I could put my gauge on there. So what I did is I did that, cleaned it all up, put the access fitting on, put my gauges on. Okay, I pressurized it with nitrogen a little bit, made sure I had no leaks, made sure everything was good. And what I did then is I took the nitrogen out, I ran a vacuum. I ran a vacuum for a good half hour. I tried to get it down to 500 microns on the micron gauge. So I did that. In the meantime, while the vacuum pump is running, you don't sit around, right? You got other things to do here. So what I did is I cleaned the condenser coil really good. I used some condensing cleaning coil, diluted it with a little water, sprayed it on. Every time you use condensing cleaning fluid, though, you got to rinse it off with water. Don't leave it on there because it's going to corrode the coil. So I did that. Everything was good. Cleaned everything up. And I'm like, okay. I got down to a good vacuum. I stopped the vacuum. I let it hold a little bit to see if it would hold in the vacuum. And it did. It was perfect. It came down to like 29 pounds of vacuum. So what I did is then after that, and I charged the unit up with 134A, which is a type of refrigerant. And I charged the unit up, but before I charge the unit up, what you do is you have to weigh the charge in. Okay, you have a refrigerant scale, you put the refrigerant on the scale, hook it all up, and then what you do is you look at the refrigerant amount going into the system. And on the nameplate, on the unit, it'll say how many ounces of refrigerant the unit takes, which is very critical, especially for these small units. They have capillary tube expansion valves, right, which we'll get into. But it has to be measured correctly because you can't overcharge it, you can't undercharge it. It's got to be perfect. So what I did is I weighed my charge in. I think it was, I forget how many ounces it was. It wasn't even a pound. It was I think maybe 12 ounces, around there. So I charged it up. Okay, and now I have an access T there that I can put my gauges on, and I can put the charger with the refrigerant. So, like I said, I charged it up to what was on the scale and what the nameplate said. I turned the unit on, let it run a little bit. My pressures were good. My low side pressure was good. My high side pressure was great. And I just watched it for like 20 minutes until the box cooled down. Cooled down to a perfect temperature. And what I did is I cleaned up everything up, and then I mentioned to the manager at the store, which you're always trying to look for other things that could help the customer out in the long run, because they don't know. So what I noticed is that the tracks on the beverage cooler were all broken and worn and everything like that. So the doors weren't moving really freely. They would get stuck and they would jam and you gotta wiggle them. So what I did to the manager, I said, listen, I suggest, and I put on a ticket, that I suggest that the tracks be replaced. Usually they say, okay, yeah, go ahead, order it, which they did. So now I have another job to go back to. That's a good thing for a business, you know? So in the long run, everything looked good. As far as the job at the end, the customer was happy, I was happy, the beer was happy, everybody's happy. So the thing is too, is when you go onto a job, don't forget to get the model numbers and serial numbers of the unit. Because if you're not working for yourself, you're working for somebody else, that's the first thing that they're going to want to do when you write a ticket out. model number, serial number, voltage, refrigerator. That's important because they're going to be like, where's the model number? Where's the serial number? Blah, 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 right? Of course. So my advice is when you go into a job, just don't go and look at just the problem at hand. Look at the overall. Look at the unit itself. Look at the doors, the gaskets, the way the condensers are, the evaporators, and and we'll get into all that in later lessons, and we'll explain all that. But in the meantime, I think that's good for my first scenario lesson, and I'm going to be doing this every Saturday, uploading probably Saturday night or maybe Sunday morning. And like I said, I'll do this every week, a different job. And then I'll also have a video coming out on Wednesday night or Thursday morning on a refrigeration lesson. I'll start with the refrigeration cycle, and I'll go through it really thorough. So anybody that wants to learn in the field, people in the field that aren't really sure about things, that's what I'm here for. I'm here to help explain things, take your questions. I want your comments. Any kind of comment. It doesn't have to be related to refrigeration. It could be electrical or plumbing or whatever you have. If you have anything, suggestions on the channel, the way to improve it, everything's always helpful for me. Like I said, I want to help you guys out. To help yourself, especially at this time where money is really tight and people need to do some things on their own. They don't want to call people in. So I'm here to help if you have a problem. Make sure to comment below. Email me at mrcrefrigeration@hotmail.com, and also subscribe, like, and hit that bell. Alright, so for now, I'm going to sign off, and I will see you next week, Wednesday. Peace out, God bless, and be safe.